Welcome to Network Security, everything you need to know about protecting your remote work experience as well as enabling your digital workloads. My name is Sinead O'Donovan, and I lead our network security product management team as well as our Azure Front Door, a cloud CDN. These are indeed crazy times, unprecedented in so many ways. No one, in my mind, could have predicted this year that we've had. And it has been especially challenging in the area of network security. From the amount of attacks that we've experienced on our network during the March to June, we saw a 50% spike in DDoS attacks. We saw increased variance in phishing and in the different types of bots that were trying to break into workloads. We saw organizations really struggle with how do they bring new applications to market, especially in the government and healthcare systems. We heard from our retailers where they talked about their online sites now having a Black Friday every day. That equivalent of traffic load. And then we also heard from customers who are really struggling to support that transition to remote work. And when they hit VPN scalability issues, if they were still using an on-premise VPN solution. And for our services in particular within Azure, it's been at least 90% growth in the overall consumption of them, everything across VPN, Azure Front Door, Azure Firewall, every one of them has really usage has just taken a new dimension of growth. This, I would say, like the best way to describe COVID, at least from our perspective, is it really was an accelerator for us on a set of key trends that were already underway. The first one was how was an organization, what their internet edge actually looked like, and how many of them are now really moving to using the cloud as their internet edge. That's the first sort of thing that we saw. The other thing that we saw is that customers really trying to get the user to application to be more internet first. When all the users left the corporate network, there really was no corporate network anymore. And as we look at applications, the design and how you make them available, it's really, we want to think about an internet first strategy. However, you do want the internet it's a little bit of a Wild West. And so you have to also be thinking about, well, not every part of your application should be on the internet. And so there, it's all about, in the back end, it's all about how do you use private connectivity. It gives you another layer of defense in addition to additional mechanisms that you can use to protect the workload. And then the third kind of major thing that customers, when they move to the cloud, they really aren't just looking for a cheaper place to run their workload. They're looking for a transformation that gives their developers more agility, that gives them more flexibility, that they can be more adaptive. And so they really are embracing this sort of, how do I get infrastructure as cloud? Because every one of our services is API driven. It really allows them to use new DevOps and incorporate CI/CD pipelines as part of their overall cycle of making changes, and they can just move faster. And so we're seeing that same model and approach in network security, something that you never thought about if you were on premises. And so really we're looking at kind of this flat open network, going from that flat open trusted network to really a software defined model using zero trust principles. And just a reminder for everyone who isn't already familiar, because it has become quite an industry-wide model, is that those three core principles are really about verify explicitly all access requests, use a least privilege model, and then always assume that a breach may be possible. So how do you prevent that latter movement in your network? So speaking of security models, you may ask yourself, well, tell me a little bit more about what does zero trust for networking actually mean? And it really is quite simple. It's really going from this flat open network to a fully segmented network. All, even you can go to, instead of having 3 to 10 perimeters, you really can go to thousands. And again, that infrastructure as code and that software defined networking model really supports that model to go as deep as you need to go to protect your workloads. The second kind of key thing is, how do you really beef up your threat protection capabilities. I think in sort of this old world, you were using a lot of static filtering, and you had years of history of these rules that you're not sure anymore. Were they working? Why are they there? But really going to more of an ML-driven and behavior-driven rule creation. And so really looking at threat protection from a new lens. And then the third major thing is really how do you approach encryption? And it's not just about, the user to app, which you say, hey, I'm using SSL, you're encrypted. It's really not. It's like the layers of encryption that you have in the infrastructure, in the back end. How do you really make sure that if there's any breach at any layer, that you can make sure that there's very little damage they can do or very little that they can exfiltrate? So that's sort of really about the zero trust model. I really like another model. Gartner last year published this really interesting paper. It's the future of network security. It's all in the cloud, and it has a kind of a catchy name. It's called the Secure Access Service Edge, or SASE, and really that's looking at this sort of convergence of both the network connectivity model and the network security model, and how those come together so that you can be more secure and be more agile. And these models really fit very, very well into our approach at Microsoft in enabling you to be more secure. So let me dig in a little bit more, tell you a little bit more about, there's kind of 5 hero scenarios for Azure networking all up. The first one is about how do you set up that secure foundation so that you can build those apps. The second one is really about how do you enable remote work at scale, and what are the different services that we provide to enable you to have a great remote experience. And then the third one is what about your apps? How do you deliver them? And then there's a set of services around how you connect up your infrastructure. And then the fifth one is really about the 5G and edge compute and how you build new types of apps. So today I'm just going to focus in on the 3, the network infrastructure, remote work at scale, and app delivery. And this is all using the foundation of all these services. We have one of the largest global networks, and that's an underpinning to everything that we do here. So let's dig right in. And the first one up is remote work at scale. So all of our services in Azure are very composable. And then we integrate them with specific services, or we integrate them natively within the service. So I want to just talk about the first 3 or a little bit about how do you do connectivity. So we've got VPN, and there's 2 modes to VPN. How do you connect remote users to your networks? And then there's another capability, which is how do you connect your networks together? And we support both modes. And I would say every Azure customer uses VPN for one or more of these capabilities. The second service, which is really think about it as a dev-orientated service, it's really how do you do seamless RDP and SSH into your resources without having to give that resource a public IP. And that's our Azure Bastion service. And then the third service is Virtual WAN. And this really is an integration service. It does have some core routing capabilities as well to enable that a full mesh network, but it really is a united framework of how you bring networking and security and the global network all together in one integrated way. And then we have a set of security services then, Azure Firewall, which is all about how do you create and enforce, traffic rules that work across subscription or virtual network. And then we have Firewall Manager, which is really how do you do central global policy at scale, and how do you have a global policy and a local policy, and how do you consolidate your routing as well, configuration. And so these sets of service kind of really enable that SASE edge that I spoke about. So I want to just give you a couple of quick highlights on a little bit into VPN Gateway and tell you what's new. So first of all, one of the approaches that we've taken in VPN is very platform oriented, open protocols. And so we support IKEv2, OpenVPN, which is the only truly open source SSL library available, and SSTP. And so really any client that supports IKEv2, which they all do, or OpenVPN will work with our solution. And this is the high scale VPN solution, and it's got fully Azure AD integrated, and that's completely new. Everything from single sign-on to multi-factor auth to conditional access. And we also, even though we work with all these third-party clients, we do provide our own native client for Windows, and we also provide a client for Mac OS, which is now in preview. So the next service I want to tell you a little bit about is Bastion. And again, my goal here is not to go in depth on the service, but just to pique your interest, and there'll be other sessions where you can learn a little deeper. So the key new thing with Azure Bastion is now, originally it used to be constrained to the VNet, to the specific VNet. Now it supports VNet peering. So you can just deploy one Bastion gateway and it will work with all your peered VNets. And in addition, it will also work with on-premise resources. So really phenomenal improvements in Bastion. Then the third one that I want to talk about, this is a very simple integration that we've done, which is with Virtual Desktop and Azure Firewall. There's two parts to Windows Virtual Desktop that you need to think about when you're protecting. There's one part which is, in order to use the service, the customer sets up the VMs in their own subscription. And so, and then of course, once the users start connecting to the service, that is all done through those VMs that were deployed. So when we look at this integration, it really is about those VMs to the service that we've locked down and made it super easy for you to be able to control the traffic flows and protect that part of it. And with the integration with Firewall Manager, you could also deploy firewall and third-party security to help protect the user traffic. So that's just a little bit about those services. So the next service I want to just talk about is Azure Virtual WAN and Firewall Manager together. This is perhaps the most complex to speak to in this brief webinar, but the idea here is that it is an open platform of connectivity and security. So if you look at the diagram, you can see that we can connect to anything, and including AWS and GCP, your branch offices through SD-WAN, your data centers, whether through ExpressRoute or VPN, and your end user. So we give you this really nice model where you can bring all your traffic together into this hub. And then we've native security integrated into the hub, and we've also got third-party security integrated. So what's nice and new here is we've now, both Checkpoint and iBoss are in public preview and hopefully soon going to GA with their integration. And we've also opened up the hub so that now the SD-WAN providers can even add additional mechanisms to optimize the flow within the hub. So lots of great capabilities here. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Gopi. He's going to do a quick demo of the integration between VPN, Virtual WAN, and Azure Firewall.
Thank you, Sinead. My name is Gopi Krishna Kannan. I'm a Principal Product Manager in the Azure Firewall team. So I'm going to demo the Secure Virtual Hub, combining Azure Firewall with VPN client access. Before I start my demo, I want to share a slide on what you're going to be seeing today. Here is a view of the demo setup. The vWAN hub has been secured using both Azure Firewall and Zscaler. Azure Firewall will filter east-west traffic. This includes all traffic between VNets and branch offices and client access. Zscaler will secure all internet traffic. Notice that the hub has two servers to the left of the image. We will now demonstrate remote user access to these servers via the Azure Firewall and internet breakout for the remote user via Zscaler. We start by visiting the Firewall Manager, which provides a centralized experience for managing all your firewall deployments. Notice that the hub has both Azure Firewall and Zscaler. Firewall is used for private traffic filtering and Zscaler for internet breakout. Next, we will download the VPN configuration. This is required for setting up VPN client access to the hub. The VPN client supports native Azure Active Directory authentication with single sign-on, conditional access, and multi-factor authentication, thus enabling a zero-trust access model. Now, launch VPN client and connect to the hub. We will run ipconfig to verify the hub provided IP address. Next, we will ping the servers connected to the hub and verify that we are able to access the Azure resources thanks to the allow rules configured in the firewall. Now, for the sake of this demo, we will remove one of the servers from the firewall allow rule. This will automatically block access to the server from remote client access or any other VNets connected to the hub. Notice the ping failure on the right. This is because it has been blocked by the Azure Firewall default deny rule. We have now verified private traffic filtering via Azure Firewall. Next, let's verify internet traffic breakout via Zscaler. We browse to show my IP. Notice the IP displayed is Zscaler IP. This means all internet traffic has been secured using Zscaler. You can also visit the Zscaler portal to set up internet policy and review traffic to the internet. Zscaler provides detailed information of the traffic to the internet. You can also sort and search the logs for interesting traffic patterns. This completes our demo. Now back to you, Sinead.
All right, thank you, Gopi. That was really, really great. I love how we saw the client seamlessly connecting into Azure and also being able to connect to the internet through a third party. So that's great. So let me tell you a little bit about the secure foundation now. And this really it's really super important that there's kind of two main use cases that customers are really trying to do. The first one is really about how do you do network segmentation. And the virtual network is the center point here. This is the place where you put all your resources, and you with a lot of SDN controls, you can then have multiple VNets. You can create a central VNet if you so choose and peer them together. And so the VNet is kind of that foundational network segmentation control. And then in the VNet, there's sort of two additional controls that are very useful. One is the network security groups. Think of that as your endpoint kind of firewall or in-node firewall that works on the VNet or within the VNet. And then the second very useful control is private link, which is your ability to take a PaaS service and then attach it to the virtual network so you can access that PaaS service privately. You can access it from on-premise, or you can really take that PaaS service off the internet for your specific resource. And then Firewall is also incredibly useful here as you go to segment, because Firewall works across VNets, multiple VNets, and across subscriptions. And it also can be sort of a filtering node for all traffic, whether it's your egress out to the internet. And it can block, and it works on higher layers as well. So not alone is it layer 3, layer 4, but also layer 7 control. So then as you look at sort of your threat protection capability, if you have a public IP that you're exposing to the internet, we highly recommend that you enable DDoS protection on it. Our DDoS will then tune it to your specific application workload. And you may also want to look at using Firewall here as you want to govern that flow as well. And that's just, again, to give you that overall threat protection. So when you put these three together, the segmentation and the threat protection, and then the underlying foundation capability we have for encryption, that really sets you up well for zero trust networking. So I want to tell you a little bit about what's new. We have now got 36 services that are private link enabled. Every new service coming out of Azure now will support private link. And I hope soon to also talk to you about all services. All services in Azure have a plan for when they will support private link. We hope in the not too distant future, you will see all services in Azure supporting private link. A lot of new capabilities came to Azure Firewall. SQL was a big one. Being able to force tunnel to on-premise was also a big one. And some nice things in preview right now, like all ports protocols and DNS proxy. And on the DDoS front, we really amped up the amount of protection you have. And so now we have the capacity to protect up to about 45 terabit attack, which is huge given the largest known attack is about 1.7 today. So we hope that is enough, and we'll continue to advance here. So let me just dig in a little bit and tell you a little bit more about app delivery. This is another area that's super important to your digital experiences. how do you protect those web applications? How do you scale them? How do you optimize them? How do you keep them reliable? So a suite of services here, WAF being a foundational one, where you block common vulnerabilities like SQL injection or bots. I didn't know this, but half of the traffic on the internet is bots. Really just, this should be the age of the rise of the bots. And it's sort of interesting too that they're not all bad bots, but a lot of them are. And when you look at your WAF, it's very tied to your delivery mechanism. And so we have kind of two groups of delivery mechanisms available for customer. The first one is Azure Front Door. This service is really tuned for your internet workloads. Office 365, LinkedIn, every one of our internal services uses Front Door to both accelerate it, and then they apply the WAF policies to protect it. And this runs at the edge of our network in the 170 POPs worldwide. And it really accelerates and protects the workload with the WAF policies. We also have a regional load balancer that also can be configured as an ingress controller for AKS. So the combination of actually Azure Front Door and App Gateway really make a really excellent pair as you think about those modern apps, those containerized workloads. And DDoS, again, can be layered here. In the case of Azure Front Door, it's natively integrated and will offer native protection out of the box. And then likewise, Firewall is often is also used here to protect outbound traffic flows from the app and some of the inbound flows. So a couple of things on what's new with WAF. Really key was the supporting AKS natively, as well as the Sentinel integration. And we continue to have features. We've brought a number of features then to the regional WAF, has now got bot support. And we've also added WAF on our CDN infrastructure as well. So just want to maybe one of the key things, you may not necessarily think about Azure Front Door or CDN as a protection capability, but they really are, because when we saw during this COVID situations, keeping your website and property up and running is a big deal. And how do you get that high scale? And how do you give the optimal experience to users no matter where they come from? And so really that is about our Azure Front Door. New capability here was the introduction of the rules engine, giving you a lot of control over kind of if the client looks like this, I want you to do this. A lot of those fine-grained controls, and also the AKS ingress controller for App Gateway was also very key here. So this is just a view of all of the services together, how they are kind of layered. And really our mindset here is kind of a defense in depth model where you can use, you start with the foundation, which is our software-defined network controls. Then you pair that with your network security controls, your network connectivity controls, and then that you can also augment with partners. So, the key takeaways here, just a set of things I want you to consider, explore VPN and Bastion for remote users. Definitely segment your network with VNets and network security groups. Really take a defense in depth strategy and embrace that internet first with a private backend, and enable WAF on all your web workloads. And then explore Azure as your internet edge with Virtual WAN and Firewall Manager. There's a lot more sessions where you can learn more about network security. I wanted to list these here, and I encourage you to attend all of them. And also, I want to just highlight in the next slide the all-up Azure networking sessions that you may also want to attend, which will give you more information on connectivity and 5G, and even go more deeper into satellite connectivity, and also the all-up what's new in Azure networking. I would highly recommend you read as well. Well, that's it today, everyone, and thank you very much for watching.